Hello and welcome to the Deep Sea Podcast, a punk take on a science podcast about everything deep sea. I'm Dr. Thom Lindley, curator of fishes at the National Museum of New Zealand, Te Papa Tongarewa, and with me is the Professor Alan Jameson, director of the Deep Sea Research Centre at the University of Western Australia and scientist for Inkfish. Any of our dumb opinions are our own and do not reflect the opinions of our respective organisations. Right now, that's out the way. We can talk about whatever we like. Hello, mate.
Hello.
Where do we find you?
I'm in the Industrial Badlands of Las Palmas on the Canary Islands in the central Atlantic Ocean.
So lovely holiday.
You've
gone there by choice.
There's cranes everywhere and containers and
you love that stuff. And that smell of oil and diesel.
Yeah, crumbling buildings and mopeds. Yeah, it's beautiful. Very sweaty as well.
Oh,
just
lovely.
To add to the ambience of the Industrial Badlands.
Are you allowed to say what you're out there doing?
I guess so. I'm here for a week or two to modify our landers. Work with the sub team. The sub who's here is in a hangar somewhere. The ship's getting a makeover. It's getting a full paint job and lots of modifications to it.
We were having a chat out as well. It's like anyone who's walked around the internals of a vessel will know how close and tight quarters that those can be. And so when you're doing big stuff on a vessel, it's not unusual to just open a wall and bring stuff directly in. Like if you're replacing the larger machinery, say the stuff in the galley or certainly an engine, you just can't get that inside. So you just cut a big hole in the side of the ship, which is always quite daunting. That there's just a big open cavity in the side of the vessel.
Then you just get that piece, you put it back and you just weld it back on again. Grind it down, jobs are good. And no one even knew you were there. Fascinating to see these things. It's funny to see that ship go full circle because when I first joined it, it was getting refitted and all the stuff that was all nice and shiny lying on the quayside, there wasn't like all the doors on the inside. We've been around those doors now for 7 years.
Yeah, you said like so much of it looks like new and then you'll round a corner and it's like, it's like walking into your house because you lived on that vessel for about 3 years.
Yeah, spent a lot of time in there. But there's bits that are so unbelievably familiar. But the refit is such that there's quite significant structural changes in it. So you're just like, where am I right now? Like I've completely disoriented. And then you turn around and you see like a vent on the wall. And you go, oh, okay, right. It's like I'm here.
Know where I am now.
It's peculiar. But it'll be. I'm sure after the first trip it'll just become normal again.
I met the Prime Minister of New Zealand and a few other ministers, and I didn't mess it up.
So why were you meeting the Prime Minister? Why were you hobnobbing it with the people you shouldn't be hobnobbing with?
Yeah, the people I really shouldn't be. I thought I was just going to be the face in the background of sort of crowd shots, but I ended up having quite a long chat to him about ice fish and Antarctic stuff. And I'll have to include some of the pictures and I'll send them to you as well, Adam, because I did my usual really good thing of blending right in.
All right.
Yeah.
Did you go full silver mohawk?
Because I'm a chameleon, I can just sort of blend into any situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm quite well dressed for me, but yeah, there's no getting away from a silver mohawk.
Can I ask a question though?
Yeah.
On a gig where the Prime Minister's there, did it ever cross your mind to wear a suit?
It did not. I'm wearing a rather stylish coat because we were outside. It was the groundbreaking ceremony for our new biodiversity centre. Great news for the sector, really. Tough times at the moment for science, so some investment in it was really, really welcome. Yeah, real victory. So it was nice to schmooze. But I was spending the whole day thinking like, I'm going to say something. I'm going to spoil all of this. Don't let me talk to him. Oh God, he's coming over. He's coming over. I shaking my hand. Just be quiet. Just smile. And then I talked for a bit about ice fish.
So does the Prime Minister of New Zealand have any private security?
He does.
He must do, right? They must have loved you.
yeah, looking nice and suspicious. A fellow with an accent who dresses funny.
Yeah. You've got a bogey at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, but it's also New Zealand, so like everyone knows everyone. So
did you get a selfie?
I did. I will send you the picture. I've got a favourite picture of just like, what are you doing? That's the Prime Minister. Yeah. Oh, actually, somebody told him about the podcast.
You're kidding.
No.
That's great.
It really is. It really is.
So he might be listening right now. Hi, Prime Minister. I'm sorry I didn't know who you were. I don't live in New Zealand. I don't follow New Zealand politics.
All right, Andy, he can't get you.
No,
you're safe.
I'm a big fan of your work and the way in which you minister is prime.
Boo.
Good job. Thanks, Prime Minister.
You know how I was saying that like I was really worried I was going to say something and ruin it all? This is it. Yeah. It wasn't on the day of the podcast.
Yeah.
Because this is on the record.
You have to do it at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody can actually dig this out. Oh dear. Oh well. There goes a fun career. It's good while it lasted. In other news, there was a meeting in Perth to discuss the red list status of a lot of deep sea species. So a lot of very talented fishers got together in a room and decided how vulnerable species were based on life history and how under pressure they were from human activities. Because it's an interesting process. You see that little label, that little sort of red list status thing in like fish base and things like that. It's interesting how that comes together and what sort of decisions people make. Georgia from the eDNA episode was there as well. And she messaged me saying that some of the Hadal snailfish, some of the trench snailfish were on there. And she might ask, well, input from me. And I rather flippantly replied with, they are precious babies and need to be saved at all costs, which apparently was relayed to the room. So that's, I hope that's on minutes somewhere. I hope somebody actually made a note of that. They are precious babies and must be protected at all costs.
It's true. I don't understand the red listing at all. I just don't kill them.
Just don't, please. That sounded like a plea. A little shout out to our patrons. We couldn't do the show without you. It really is what makes this happen. And this month we would like to thank Hugo Shiboski. So thank you for supporting the show. Our patrons get access to our Discord channels. Hugo arrived on the Discord, got a nice welcome there. It also turned out that I hadn't broken the Patreon. I'm still not quite sure how Patreon works, so them turning up was a good sign. It means I hadn't completely broken it. That was great. Some custom milled keels for the bespoke handmade USV that one of the teams developing, nice critter photos from a ghost dive trip, debating the necessity of jars in legitimizing a science career and can they be opened. So there were some tales of scary museum jars that you can't actually open, but the thing that's inside is really fragile. So do you just go for it? Do you just smash the jar or just accept that it lives in the jar now? Baby Dumbo Octopus paper, and Kat was kind enough to share some very cute pictures of baby Dumbo octopuses. People are making deep sea lino cut prints on canvas, which are turning out beautiful. We had ceramic hagfish sculptures, blown glass mermaids purses complete with kelp. Me and Kat told a story about a dog that adopted us in South America, but it was a very badly behaved dog. Yeah, we got a lot of dirty looks for not controlling our dog, but it was not our dog. Yeah, so it's all going on in the Discord. I had a song of the month. I got some good British punk and modern British punk as well. So my little anthem for the last little while has been This Might Be It by Hyphen, which is some good, angry, political British punk. I realized I've been like drifting away into the Spotify algorithm because it just keeps suggesting me things and then I've listened to those things. So I got back to my roots. I've got some good, angry, political punk.
So in the news, there's a story about deep sea desalination pulling fresh water from the deep sea. It's in Scientific American, but it goes on about it's an anticipation of the world outpacing its freshwater supply in the next 5 years. Right, so there's various companies are turning to desalination, and that's being sourced from the deep ocean. This is obviously quite topical because it is a real thing, and the way they do it is they pump water up from, in this case, they're talking 500 meters, and you use reverse osmosis to take the salt out of it, essentially. So as long as you're near the coast, you've got access to seawater, you can then change that into freshwater. Desalination comes with all sorts of problems, all sorts of marine biology problems as well, with jellyfish blooms blocking the desalination plants and things like that. But using deep sea water is also not that new a thing. We wrote about this recently. I can't remember if it made the final cut of that 200 meter paper, but they're talking here about pulling water up in 500 meters to convert it to freshwater. But I believe in Taiwan, they were doing it much deeper than that. And there's at least 3 inlets, I think, off Hawaii. And so they do it for all sorts of reasons. So this is not necessarily a new technology, but it's probably the news story is more like, it's probably more demand now. I think the reason they go really deep as well and not just pump it from the sea and desalinate the coast is because of all the organics in it. If you go down deep, you get clearer water and requires less processing at the other end.
This one was an interesting extra take on that because, you know, how with reverse osmosis, you've got to really drive it through the membrane because it's not the direction it wants to go in. So this one was actually using the pressure itself. So it kind of flipped the ratio. So you had these empty canisters that they send down that include the membrane, and the pressure is what pushes the water into the canister. And so you end up with a canister full of fresh water on the way up. I'm not sure on the energetics of that though.
If it was that easy, you would have thought it'd be more common. And then you can put it in cans and sell it to people for $5 a shot and call it deep sea water, even though it's not seawater anymore and it's not deep. It's just water.
It's been around for a long time. We've all drunk dinosaur
mystical
pee.
Healing properties. Yeah.
Cool new camera system has been used to capture footage from the Octopus Garden, so the one at the Davison Seamount off the coast of Monterey Bay in California. Nice new setup. The principal engineer was Kakani Katija, who you might remember from our FathomNet interview. She does a lot of things, but this is a cool new camera system. So along with a senior research specialist, Chrissy Hayford. They're both with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Institute. It's a low light system. It's a multi-camera system using a light field imaging. Basically what this does is you capture the animal from multiple angles and it allows you to recreate the animal's posture. So you have a sort of simulated skeleton, I'm very carefully saying that, of the octopus. You have a model octopus basically in a computer algorithm, and you can use the cameras to then understand where each of those arms are in space. You know the sort of rough dimensions and proportions of an octopus as a model, and then you can, with this camera system, actually apply how the octopus is moving in that space. So that allows you to track individuals in a wide shot, look at this whole community sort of interacting. But what they're really interested in is using this for sort of biologically inspired design. So designing robots based on how octopuses move. It's a very cool new camera system, so I'm looking forward to seeing more applications for that. New footage from a huge deep sea canyon was captured for the first time. This is a really interesting story, and I think it's an interesting science story, but it is also more interesting maybe story about people engaging with the deep sea and the way that public perception is changing. So this was led by Argentinian scientists aboard the Smith Ocean Institute's vessel Falcor 2, an expedition to Argentina's Mar del Plata Canyon. So squid, pink lobsters, sea anemones, like really, really nice visuals from the area. Live streamed from the ROV from more than 3,500 meters. Great to get actual visuals on some of this and some really nice complex interactions. And I was helping some of the team with some fish ID that were like associated with these really nice bubblegum corals, and that sort of association, it's hard to get from a trawl because you just kind of get everything smashed up together. But when you see the animals living together, you can make inferences about that. But it kind of went viral. A typical dive has an average of 4,000 online views. So when they live stream, they get about 4,000 views. But this mission in particular just spread throughout Argentina. So they were getting 500,000 views per dive and amassed over 17.5 million views in total. And the live streams were being watched in classrooms, in gyms. I heard about it in bars. You know, when they'll sometimes put like a retro movie or something in the background of the bar and you just kind of half watch Predator 2. They were doing that just with an ROV live stream, and like the whole country was getting behind it. And it then sort of formed into a bit of a commentary on the defunding of science, and it became a bit of a political movement almost. Friend of the show, who's actually been on the show as well, Johanna Weston, was actually on that trip using one of her new sampling devices, and she was the first person to use our deep sea answer phone.
Hello, no one is available to take your call. Please leave a message after the tone.
Hi, Thom. It's Johanna. I was just calling you after getting back from an expedition on the RV Falcor 2 at the Mar del Plata Canyon off the coast of Argentina. And it was extraordinary. It was beautiful. It was exploration. And most importantly, we brought everyone along with us. The science party was mostly from Argentina, funded through CONICET, and it was a lot of taxonomists, and they had been studying this area since 2012 with 3 expeditions using trawls and nets, and they had never seen the seafloor. And we got to use ROV Sebastian and see the seafloor. It was amazing. There were corals, there were 3-foot-long sea cucumbers or batatas, also known lovingly as sweet potatoes, and our expedition really went viral. It was seen by all these people, nearly 17.5 million views. The people were engaged on YouTube and on Twitch, listening to us talk about the deep ocean like we were talking to our friends. So one of the things that you're so great in this podcast about doing, and I think one of your driving ethos, is to show people and tell people that our deep ocean, most of our planet, is filled with incredible wonder and life. And we always hope that people understand and resonate with that. And that's what made this expedition so exciting, is that the viewers were part of the whole expedition with us. On our 4th dive, we ended up seeing a common starfish, and I know you and I have a thing about common starfish. There was a common starfish with a pretty juicy booty, and that set off this cascade of viewership. People were watching from their homes, from bars, from gyms, from schools, And with that, people were captivated and they put all of their creativity forward with drawings and paintings and videos and food and cakes, t-shirts, artists making creations. People were expressing how beautiful they thought these animals were. People were creating educational materials so that kids could follow along while they were watching the expedition. People were active participants in the knowledge generation process. So the chat stream on YouTube and Twitch, it was on one of the screens in the control room, and it was just like going crazy, especially when 50,000 people were live viewing it. 75% of the viewership was from Argentina. Most of the country was watching. So when we ask, why don't people care about the deep ocean? And I think part of that is they just don't know about it. We haven't had the technology, and now we do, to have high def streaming and being able to have it live streamed. So one of my favorite videos that people made from a boy in his room, and he had posted some things that he was trying to collect on the wall, and he had a light and he was moving like he was Sebastian and trying to collect these animals, much like we were trying to collect animals. And he was playing his own game. Probably a week before, he didn't know what the deep ocean was. And in a time when science funding is kind of low and there's some really big problems facing the deep ocean, it's really motivating that people do care about the deep ocean. So I'm leaving with a lot of hope and excitement from this expedition. And I just want to say a really big thank you to you, Thom. There was a moment where we collected a really gorgeous pink snailfish, and I'm so glad that we even got to connect in this expedition and that you got to help me on what we do with this really beautiful specimen and how to take the best care of it. You and Andrew Stewart were there to help with some fish identifications. Together, that really speaks to the power of doing science and the power of community and the power of communication. Thanks. Bye.
So scientists mostly from China have found this flourishing chemosynthetic life at the greatest depths of the Halo Trenches in the North Pacific. They had a couple of expeditions to the Aleutian Trench and the Kurak-Kamchatka Trench off Russia using their Fuel from Death manned submersible, and they found the deepest known chemosynthetic communities. Up until this point, I think the deepest one was about just over 7,000 that the Japanese found. But it seems to be something that was just happening in that area. And Ronnie Glood, who was on last month's podcast.
Yep, yeah, on the last episode.
I happened to be chatting to him the other day about something else, and we got talking about this, and he was on that paper as well. And it's actually really, really interesting because there's things there like bivalves and things that have got ossified shells and are using calcium and stuff like that. They shouldn't be able to. And so there's this whole thing about you go to a certain depth and animals could no longer create a hard shell. But then you look at this chemosynthetic stuff that they were finding everywhere down at night. He reckoned it was all the way across the place. They were just everything they went down their dive, they found more and more of the stuff. And these are communities which are sustained by hydrogen, sulfide rich and methane rich fluids and so on. And yet we've done about 80 dives and never seen it. It was weird, like his experience in their sub and my experience in our sub are two very different things. We're having a big old chat about that. So maybe it's something which is very localized to the...
But like massive coverage where it is.
Yeah, because every single... I mean, we found bacterial mass. We found interesting, like bright yellow, bright orange bacteria, but never larger life forms.
A whole
never
community.
metazoan life forms and stuff. And they're just like all over the place up there. So, but politically, we're not allowed to dive off Russia, unfortunately. But yeah, really cool paper. And it shows that the theory was that there should be a lot of chemosynthetic activity in trenches because of the way in which the landward sides, little buckles and fissures and stuff like that, there should be seepage coming on there. And whenever there's any resource, particularly in a low food environment, something will exploit that, right? So it's great that they found it, and then in such incredible detail as well. So it's a really cool paper. Changes the way we think about it.
It's good to know that they're still long from done. It's still very, very worthwhile to get these human-occupied vehicles down there and to actually get data because we're still finding some quite big surprises.
Yes.
Plenty to do in the deepest places on Earth.
Yes, we should revisit Ronnie at some point in the future because some of the stuff we were talking about the other day about rewriting some major fundamental theory of deep sea science has come up, and partly to do with my own PhD student. She's really pushing into an area which is like, if you assume that everything we know about the deep sea is true, then none of this makes sense. So therefore, should we go back and question some of the basics? And so we spoke to Ronnie because he's obviously into biogeochemistry, and as much as we pretend we are, we're not. And the bottom line to that meme was, I think you're actually onto something. I think we need to go back and look at some of the real fundamentals. So that's quite exciting. So
That's really good.
anyway, chemosynthetic stuff's really cool.
A paradigm shift is difficult, but it has happened multiple times in science, and that's how we sort of progress, especially when they're old truths. It's really hard to unpick those. But when you think about what we were basing those on, we had such glimpses of the deep sea that a lot of these early theories were good theories, but things aren't lining up now.
Also, some of the things, I mean, this the whole finding chemosynthetic stuff at 9,500 meters and so on, and why that's surprising and stuff, remember, is also that and many, many other aspects of deep sea stuff is not right, because quite often it's just extrapolated from shallow water or shallower water, continental shelf stuff, and they went, oh, this is the decrease in this thing, and then we'll just draw a big line going down the rest of it. And what we're finding, that's why I personally find Hadal trenches quite interesting, is that they're not necessarily extrapolatable from other depths. They are sometimes quite different, and things that decrease from the surface to the abyssal plane suddenly increases again. So I think you're systematically going through lots of different things and saying, can you actually just extrapolate this? Does it become constant after depth X? And what we're talking about the other day was probably not.
I always enjoyed how much it wasn't about depth. We had a really hard time getting away from it.
That is the bottom line. Depth is a factor. Depth is definitely a factor in all of this, but it's not. I mean, depth doesn't exist, right? Depth is a distance from the surface. Technically, pressure is a factor in many, 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 many things, but it doesn't really explain anything on its own.
Yep.
It's way more complicated than that. So,
and especially, like you say, when those things aren't a straight line relationship, when it goes down and then up again.
This is a really, really good example of that. It's just chemosynthetic life at 9,500 meters. And, there's been a few times we've thought, well, we should just do a dive at whatever 9,000 meters, and there shouldn't really be much there. Very low expectations for immediately rewarding returns for those dives. They're obviously scientifically very interesting, but it's not like, wow, we saw all this stuff. And then, I remember being off Japan and I've seen the crinoid meadow, the bright yellow sea lilies everywhere. It's like hundreds of these things, thousands. And then why? There's no other place on earth that anyone's found that has a sea lily meadow like that at 9,500 meters.
Devonian ocean stuff.
Still surprises. Yeah, really cool.
Our last news piece, I will pretend to mostly understand, but I am very stupid. We lack an effective animal model for neurodegenerative disorders, so things like Alzheimer's. We use genetically altered mice as the animal model when we study these diseases, but they don't match up to us particularly well. They lack some of the compounding elements that we find in things like Alzheimer's. And weirdly, what might end up being a good model animal is the deep diving beaked whales, as they seem to suffer from similar disorders and they have the same compounding factors. They're long-lived carnivores with complex brains, seem to show cognitive decline as they get older. And so actually they may end up being the best examples to look at how these diseases sort of manifest. There's lots of very complicated words here that I've made a note of, but I'm not going to attempt to butcher them. But some of the sort of traits, some of the things that build up as our brains age are seen in these beaked whales as well, and we don't have a good animal model for those.
So some of those big words that I normally try to jump in here and save you with, I'm not going to this time. You're very much on your own.
You don't want to talk about beta amyloid deposition?
I was just looking at hyperphosphorylated tau. Okay, that, very important.
How about senile or neurotic plaques?
Yep, or cerebral amyloid angiopathy.
Bail out.
I think actually, weirdly, ironically, my neurodegenerative state is driven by the words used to describe it.
Oh, that's a good little creepypasta. That would be a good spooky story. That actually these words are what degenerate your brain. They are the cause, but it's the word.
I recognize all the letters in the word. Some of the syllables.
Oh, you've got us in a neurofibrillary tangle. Neurofibrillary. Yeah.
Fibrillary tangles.
Anyway, people smarter than us think that that the deep diving whales might be good.
Real scientists.
Yeah, proper ones.
Yeah.
Actually useful. Might actually help humanity.
Speaking of real science, Tom, don't we have a problem with real science in the modern era?
What did we decide it was called before we start this episode? Truth 2.0?
Neo-truth.
Neo-truth, the sequel to truth.
It's like truth, but it doesn't necessarily have to be true.
It just sounds like truth.
Yes.
Yeah. A large language model has said something with a lot of confidence that sounds true. And in the end, isn't that all that matters?
If I tell you something that's not true, if you believe it, does that still make it true? Even though I know it's not true.
I mean, we're getting pretty philosophical. That's getting into perception.
No, it's stupid, Tom. It's stupid. Neo-truth is stupid. But unfortunately, we live in an era where we have tools at hand to produce huge volumes of this stuff. And we have some good examples.
Episode 10 was one of my favorite episodes, debunking myths with cryptozoologist Tyler Greenfield. and a lot has changed in the 4 years since that episode. It feels like a lot has changed in the last 6 months, really. My feed is flooded with people finding mermaids, giant creatures from the depths, and for some reason, lots of videos of them getting their barnacles washed off. I don't know why people are into that. With a paragraph of text being all that's needed to make a video believable enough to fool Nana on Facebook, how do any of us hope in stemming the tide of misinformation? I am joined once again by Tyler Greenfield, paleontologist and cryptozoologist whose blog, Inserte Sedis, reveals the truth behind some cryptozoological stories and paleontological mistakes. Since we last spoke, Tyler has finished his bachelor's, written a good few papers, appeared on other podcasts, not as good as this debut on this one, of course, and is almost done with his master's thesis and on the lookout for a PhD. And you were even credited as a consultant on the new Walking with Dinosaurs. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes. I was a consultant specifically on episode 2. So if you've seen it, you can look for my name in the credits.
Yay. Man, career is going really well.
Yeah, I'm happy with it so far.
Okay, to pick up where we left off, I just need to check one thing. First, could the Meg be out there? I just want to check nothing's changed. Are you sure,
absolutely
though?
Not. Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. It's less likely, if anything.
It's one of the few things, like cryptozoologically, paleontologically, that I can say that I'm 100% certain on. Other things I'd say maybe like 99.9% certain, but the megalodon, I am absolutely confident it is extinct.
I'm sorry, folks. I know you want it to be true, and that's kind of the problem. That was our kind of thesis on the last interview is it doesn't matter how much evidence you can produce if somebody wants it to be true. And it's hard to prove a negative.
Yeah, you can prove a negative, but a lot of people think you can't. And then a lot of people will let their personal feelings override any sort of logic or facts just because they want it to be true.
And only because of that real human obsession with the biggest, the tallest, the deepest, the most ferocious. If we found something bigger, then that would be, oh, maybe that's hiding in the trenches. So it's obviously based on wish fulfillment rather than logic then.
Yeah, I guarantee you, if we ever found a shark that was predatory and bigger than the megalodon, it would start to become the subject of cryptozoological speculations. People would say, well, maybe the Meg's not out there, but this new big one, now that's a promising candidate.
You've got to have scale creep. You've got to sort of outdo it each time.
Exactly.
I was lucky enough to watch the Meg 2 on a research vessel with a load of marine biologists and just, the frothing.
I didn't like it as much as the first one. The first one was a lot of fun.
I took a lot of screen grabs of their interface because that's quite close to what we do. And I just love the idea of like everything's hexagons and has just unexplored flashing on it. That's how I see the world now. So the rules of the game have changed since we last chatted because with a paragraph of text, you can make movie quality clip that is enough to trick Nana on Facebook. And you can just churn them out. Our work's cut out for us. And it's a double-edged sword as well, because then when we publish something that is truly remarkable and real, it's pretty much guaranteed in the comments now we get, oh, this is just AI. Or nothing can live down there. This is just AI.
I see that all the time. Even like on videos that are like 10, 20 years old, that have been known. And I'm talking specifically like cryptozoological videos, like Bigfoot, sea monsters, that kind of thing. Videos that have been around for decades and people have known about. You will always get comments if you're reposting those videos. Oh, it looks like AI, it looks like CGI, even though it's way before any of that. So everybody is becoming more cautious, but also less cautious. They're quicker to say AI, but they're also less quick to actually catch it when it is AI.
It's something we've seen coming over the last few years, but there's like post-truth world where just confidence in anything has been eroded. You can't say anything because it's all just drowned out. How have you been managing to like stay hopeful, stay fighting the good fight?
I mean, I guess with some historical knowledge, at the core of it, nothing has really changed. Fake news has always been around. People have always been making up stories and trying to sell things that are not real as being real, and people have fallen for it. Mass hysteria, that kind of thing. So this kind of thing has always existed. It's just that AI makes it quicker and easier to make. It's the quantity of the material that is the problem, not necessarily the content itself. because it still can be disproven. There's still lots of flaws in the AI that you can pick out. So it's doable, but it's a ever increasing tide. The number of AI things increases with every passing month. So things have changed, but things also stay the same.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm getting a bit too disheartened because
I'm not too pessimistic.
we had the crazy taxidermy back in the Victorian era with was it Fiji mermaid?
Yeah.
Fish and a monkey.
P.T. Barnum's
Yeah.
Fiji mermaid. Well, that's the thing about a little side tangent here, but the Fiji mermaid, the one that Barnum had, was actually not even a monkey. It was a plaster sculpture of a monkey with some possible like animal bones mixed in with it. The fish was a real fish, but it wasn't even an actual fish and a monkey. It was a fish and a sculpture of a monkey, which makes it even worse, I guess.
So maybe we've actually gotten better at spotting things. And the same frustration was back then, because then when the first platypus was presented to the world, everyone was just like, oh no, I've seen this. That's just a load of animals glued together.
Yeah, it's a beaver and a duck stitched together. No, it's actually a real animal.
Oh, okay, that makes me more hopeful that we're just in a transitional period, that this has always been part of human nature. Some new tech has come along and it's going to trick people for a little while, and then we'll hopefully right the ship.
Yeah, just recently there was a prominent AI hoax sort of related to cryptozoology and paleontology. Back in April, I think it was, I was on social media, and suddenly it's just exploding everywhere. A living coelacanth has been discovered off the coast of California.
Yes.
What? That's like the greatest zoological discovery of the century. But alarm bells were already starting to ring in my head. Why California? That's not a particularly likely area for a coelacanth to show up. It's not the right habitat. You don't get like the underwater caves and rocky overhangs that they like. It's a well-studied area. There are tons of, submersible crews, ROVs, remotely operated cameras of other types, divers, surfers, swimmers, people of all sorts that are frequenting the ocean in that area. How would it remain undetected for so long? So that already didn't make sense to me. So I'm going through all the people's posts, reposting this stuff, but a lot of times they don't repost the original links. So eventually I get to the original link, click on it, and the website is a total farce. It's not a real news site. It's a blogging website called Animals Around the Globe. I've never heard of it before. And from quickly reading through the article, it is so obvious it is AI generated. It's got that classic stilted, vague text where it's clearly like trying to figure out how to say something, but never actually says anything that means anything. At that point, I knew it was an AI generated hoax. But the big problem with this one is that it actually drugged two real institutes into the mix, because this article was claiming that an ROV sent out into a submarine canyon off the coast of California by the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and the Scripps Institution was the thing that had discovered this coelacanth. And they even said that Scripps and Monterey Bay had put together like a museum exhibition with photographs and video of it. And of course, that's not true at all. I reached out to both institutions. I didn't get a response from Monterey Bay, but Scripps actually did respond to me, and they said, yes, this is not true. It never happened. So that's really a big problem. Not only when you create something that at first feels real and that will fool a lot of people, but also something that is now dragging real institutions into the mix and lying about them, because they have a scientific reputation to protect.
Yeah.
They should not be involved in this kind of hoax. But fortunately, it blew over very quickly once I exposed it, and now it's gone.
It could be malicious and sort of trying to gain credibility, but I also feel like it sounds like the whole article was AI generated, and it was just pulling from believable sources and emulating those. And so it sounds like it had very little human input at all.
Yeah, my speculation is that it had pulled from a discovery a couple years ago off the coast of California, not of a coelacanth, but I think it was of some mollusk or like smaller animal that was called like a living fossil. And I think it sort of, picked up with the association between living fossils and coelacanth and then put together this article out of that. But then, this website, Animals Around the Globe, it hasn't stopped. They keep putting out AI-generated articles. There was another one doing the rounds recently about a woolly rhinoceros mummy that was supposedly discovered in Alaska. Woolly rhinoceroses are only known from Eurasia, Northern Europe, and Northern Asia. So this would be a huge discovery, right? But it's another AI-generated article. And again, they drug real institutions into it. They said that this was a discovery made, I think, by the University of Fairbanks, Alaska. And of course, that's not true. And this was fooling people again, making the rounds. So this whole website seems to have a problem with this. And then the worst fact about it was that it wasn't just this one blogging website. They were getting picked up by MSN, which is Microsoft's news sort of outlet. For whatever reason, Microsoft has a partnership with this random blogging website and promotes all their articles. So that really helps spread it further than it ever should have. So that kind of thing is getting to be a problem.
Yeah, we've seen a shift in media as well, where it's kind of almost doesn't matter if it's not true, because you get the story, you get the clicks, and then you get to post again saying it was debunked, maybe. You get the sort of to double dip. You talking about the sort of circular language as well. The amount of time someone's on a page, the amount they read. To be fair, writing has often been this way, where you don't want to give it all away in the headline, but you have to read a long, long way, desperate for substance, and realize it never really comes.
Yeah, but that is a good point that you make me think of when you say that. AI is very repetitive in its language, very vague, but very repetitive. And if you know anything about how like language influences people, when something is repeated more and more and more, people are more likely to believe it, even if it's not true.
Yeah.
I think that's a particularly insidious facet of AI and its writing style, is that it just hammers you over the head, repeating the same facts over and over again. And that makes it seem more believable to most people with that repetition.
We'll touch on maybe some other aspects of it, but I think the important foundation thing to get in is a lot of these things that people are using are language models. And it's really important to keep focused on what it is trained on and what it is for, which is formulating believable human language. And I'm seeing a lot of friends like really over rely on it in scientific publishing. You know, it's spitting out really believable citations, which are, they're real authors. It's maybe even a real title, but it's a chimera of multiple papers stuck together. And even like I was trying to do some building in the garden and someone said, you know, oh, just use AI to generate the design. And it's a language model, so it produced a really believable design of the tools I'd need and the lengths of everything, but they didn't marry up. It was 4 different tree houses that had been cobbled together, and if you tried to join it up, it didn't match. It looked the part. It looked like it was human language, because that's all it's trying to do. It's not figuring things out. It's just sticking bits together.
It's a language model and it's an aesthetic model. It is not an information or truth model. People would do well to remember that. It is not giving you the truth. It is just predicting what is most likely to be said from the language that it has analyzed. It is not really artificial intelligence. It's just a predicted algorithm.
Because it's such a magic box, I think. If there's any take home, it's that. It is trying to write believably, but not accurately. How can we equip our listeners, because they are getting better and better? What do you look out for in an image or any other output, really, to figure out if it's been AI generated?
I would say, and this is hard to look for, but anatomy is a big one, especially when you're dealing with animals. You know, does it have the right number of eyes, the right number of legs, the right number of fins? Does it have the right color? Is the texture like too smooth? A lot of AI images are very smooth and almost too perfect. They don't have a lot of the rough textures. The lighting is too good, but also oftentimes comes from multiple directions when it shouldn't. Shadows are inconsistent. It's difficult. It's not an easy thing to learn, but once you see enough of it, you will start to notice, even on an intuitive level, that it just does not look right. And then you really have to look at the details to see if it actually matches the real animal. Because I've seen a lot of like AI generated sharks. That's becoming a thing, especially with like megalodon videos. And they almost always have incorrect anatomical details. The wrong number of fins, the wrong number of gill slits, the teeth are totally wrong. Sharks have very distinctive tooth patterns and shapes. AI never gets them right. If you know what to look for, it just becomes a total joke. Because again, it's trying to make something that looks believable, doesn't actually care about any details that are real or anatomically correct. So you do have to really be careful. Look out for the anatomical inconsistencies. Look out for the textural and lighting problems. That's what I would say would be the main giveaways of an AI-generated image, of an animal specifically. The same goes for humans. When it comes to like buildings and like vehicles and objects, it's sort of the same thing. Look for details that don't make sense. Does the car have too many wheels? Does the building have doorways or windows that don't go anywhere? Is it too asymmetrical for what humans would usually create? Does it have like a window on one side, but then not a matching window on the others?
Yeah, there couldn't be a room in there.
That kind of thing. Look for inconsistencies, things that don't make sense. But unfortunately, a lot of people won't even think about it. They'll just look at it, see the surface details and be convinced by it. So you really got to look deeper, pay attention closely.
There's that willingness as well. There's that I would like it to be true. You know, we all have confirmation bias. We all sort of approve of things that align with our understanding of the world a little bit quicker.
Yeah. It's easy even for scientists or like very knowledgeable enthusiasts or amateurs to get fooled by this kind of stuff. You know, if it's this amazing scientific discovery or photograph, and it seems at first to be anatomically sound, and it sort of lines up with pre-existing knowledge, then it's easy to fall for at first. It's not until you sit back and look at it and say, oh, there's actually a lot about this image and about this backstory, because usually images come with a backstory, which is oftentimes AI generated as well. But then you start to notice inconsistencies, things that don't make sense. You just got to take the time to look at it and think about it.
One of our listeners pointed out that suction cups on cephalopods are like the fingers. If they're not just on the underside, if they're sort of all over the place in places that you couldn't even grab anything with, that's a good one to look out for with anything tentacly, if the suction cups are over too much of the tentacles and arms.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have noticed that in some images, or to have like the wrong number of rows. Like if it's an octopus, usually they have like 1 to 2 rows of suckers. But, you know, there'll be this AI-generated monstrosity of an octopus, and it'll have a dozen rows of suckers on its arms.
It really likes repeating patterns.
Yes, it does.
Can I share a link with you? And I'll put this in the show notes, but this is a recent press release. And what particularly bugs me about this one is the press release.
Oh man, that's a terrible image.
It's awful, isn't it?
It's not even close.
But the press release is that we've seen it for the first time. The whole point of the press release is, here is a really high quality image of this animal we've never seen alive. And they stick that on it. It doesn't even have a front.
Wasn't this one filmed by Monterey Bay or one of the other institutions? I think they publicly released their images for...
Yeah, it's for Ocean. I was on it. It was me. I know what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, if the images are free to use, just use the real photographs. It's almost like people are starting to expect AI generated images to be in articles like this.
Yeah, that's sort of a difficult middle ground where it's really good for generating an image for your story, because it'll be nicely compositioned, and most importantly, it'll be, at least right now, free for credit. And so even legitimate stories I'm seeing behind an AI-generated banner. And if that's a bit of a cartoon and a bit of an infographic, not so bad. But if it's sort of misleading, especially with new species discoveries, like there's always an image of the organism, but then a over-the-top, mysterious-looking image is used as the clickbait to get you to look at it. It's a new brittle star, but it's always under the heading of like snake-armed deep-sea organism found for the first time, and it's like, it's a new brittle star and it's cute and it's pink.
Yeah, I'm starting to see this with paleontological discoveries too. New dinosaurs, any kind of prehistoric animal, where they'll even have a press packet with artwork that is accurate to the animal, and the press releases won't use that. They'll instead use an AI-generated image that looks nothing like the actual animal. So it's a problem that is growing in pretty much every scientific field when it comes to the press side of things.
It's certainly a tool that I'm dabbling in and trying to bear in mind what it is doing and what its limitations are. For generating a podcast graphic, it's so unbelievably easy, and it would be so easy to fall into that trap. We did AI generate one for eDNA just because it's difficult to show that. And I really wanted like Mr. DNA.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I wanted him in a scuba kit. There was no other way I was going to get that. Not at the sort of timescales we do. Yeah, I'm really trying not to delve into it. But for spitballing and sort of designing logos and things like that, you can sort of tweak a lot of things, but I would hope then we could get an artist to do it properly. It's just more about storyboarding and throwing things around.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using it for that kind of purpose, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just for preliminary, yeah, like you said, storyboarding kind of things, just getting ideas together. I think, though, when you do have a final version, it's best to get a real photograph or get an actual artist to do something for you.
We'll see through all this and it'll start to look tacky, and then we'll go back to having artists and something a bit more human curated.
Yeah, I think it'll happen eventually. The bubble's got to pop sometime.
Usually I keep my feeds fairly locked down, but I've noticed the YouTube homepage seems particularly bad for this. Like there was multiple little shorts, and one of them was like a Royal Navy officer like wrestling with this savage looking mermaid. And for some reason, loads of people like videos of large marine life having the barnacles washed off.
Yes. I have seen many of those of varying degrees of realisticness. Some are close, Others are pretty outlandish and not very convincing. But they have become popular. I think they trace their lineage back to an earlier kind of video. If you've been watching YouTube for the past decade, which I wouldn't recommend doing, but one type of content is like this animal rescue.
Yeah.
It comes and goes, but every once in a while, YouTube really starts to heavily promote it on your front page. And a lot of times it's blatant animal abuse, right?
Yeah.
They put these animals in dangerous situations and they've been claiming to rescue them. Well, a certain specific subtype within this video is a turtle with barnacles glued to its back. A lot of times they're like sort of pet turtles, like tortoises.
So not even marine.
Every once in a while, there will be a marine turtle, which is especially concerning.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they are just like somebody's pet turtle that they've glued barnacles to. Then they'll scrape them off, which is terrible. Turtles have a very sensitive keratin covering, filled with blood vessels over the top of their shell. It is animal abuse. People don't like to think of it that way, but it is, just to get people's clicks. But I think this sort of like scrubbing the barnacles off the whales, AI-generated videos, probably can be traced back to those kinds of videos.
I think it was a convergence of a few things. So there was also the tour guide who got quite a lot of criticism because they were taking the barnacles off the chins of grey whales.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the whales did appear to be sort of coming in and almost asking for this, but it did leave an open wound that was vulnerable to infections. And I think also it's that Dr. Pimple Popper kind of thing, like that.
Yes.
We've got that
Yeah,
kind of
that's a good
grossness.
point.
Yeah, we just like, oh, that must feel so much better. And we get this sort of weird associated
satisfaction,
Yeah.
like relief with it. There's like an anthropomorphic factor to that.
Yeah, I bet that feels so much better to have that taken off. Yeah, you're really right. Watch out for any online content with sort of animal rescue stuff, because I know a lot of people eventually notice. You don't see the consistency of it. You just see things pop up in your feed and you'll like it in the moment, but you don't see that person's whole back catalog. And there was a lot of these so-called rescues, and then people noticed, wait, it's the same dog in every one. You're just abusing your dog.
Or like, I don't know if you've seen any of these, but the fake fishing videos where they'll like dig a hole and put like a dead catfish into it. And then they'll pretend like it's alive, like a hand puppet almost. And they'll have the catfish come out of the hole, then they'll grab it and pretend to catch it. Of course, like catfishes don't live in holes like that in the ground.
In your backyard.
They killed this fish, not even to eat it, but just to use it
Play
for
with
this video.
it as a puppet.
Yeah, there's all kinds of these things. So my number one warning to people on the internet is be very cautious of people who are very open about being animal lovers. If their whole identity is being an animal lover, I have found those people are often the cruelest to animals. It's counterintuitive, but a lot of people claiming to rescue animals, to really love them, don't have a lot of knowledge to them and often are putting them in harm's way. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes less so. But they're the kind of personality to watch out for.
If it's led by social media engagement, if they're an animal rescue that has a Twitter or has an Instagram, that's one thing. But if they are an online influencer and that's the first thing, it's a bit cart before the horse.
Or if they're like a self-proclaimed like animal sanctuary. You see these with like big cat sanctuaries here in the States. They're not accredited. They are abusing their animals. They're not doing anything good, but they have a huge social media presence. There's also plenty of like these in like the reptile and aquarium trades as well.
Oh, we went dark. I mean, that's not deep sea, but I think that's an important note.
It's unfortunate, but people should be more aware of it, because I see a lot of well-meaning people who think this stuff is real and need to be more aware that you should not be supporting this kind of content.
Take care out there, Nana. Watch out for Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to harness the power of nanas on Facebook and get them annotating deep sea footage. We need to get them all on FathomNet.
Something more productive.
You could use all of that like energy to draw boxes around sea anemones. It would really help us out. I know last time we both had a spectacular rant about one of our most hated pieces of misinformation, which is mockumentaries and what if trash, basically presented as if it was real science. Have there been any other big ones since we last spoke?
At least not in the style of the old Discovery Channel ones. There are definitely documentaries out there that are pushing pretty close to being fictional. Like a lot of the Shark Week ones still are towing the line, but have just enough reality that they're not really like a full-on mockumentary. There haven't really been any that I'm aware of.
I'll be very glad if those have died out.
I sure hope so.
I'm hoping it was just threats of being sued, because they mentioned real scientists and real organizations, and a 3-second disclaimer that flashes up at the end isn't going to cut it.
Oh.
Is there any other areas you'd like to cover? Because this is just so huge. I feel so saturated by it.
I mean, yeah, AI content is definitely getting bad in like cryptozoological related topics. I'd say more so than other fields. A lot of AI Bigfoot. If you're on any Bigfoot groups anywhere, which I am, because I love that stuff, even though I'm not a believer. The AI images are increasing all the time. You get a lot of people who are calling them out, but a lot of people are like, "Wow, this is the greatest footage ever," and it's clearly an AI image. It doesn't really have any anatomical fidelity. It's blurry and misshapen, but it's enough to fool people because it looks enough like a real photo. It's got just enough of the texture and lighting, even if it's not quite right. So it's becoming a bigger problem in the cryptid world, even than like the zoological or paleontological world. I also think zoologists and paleontologists are better equipped generally to handle that kind of thing. They're more skeptical, more cautious. That's not to say they're perfect and they still fall for it, but they're better equipped than most cryptozoologists are. It's just the fact that a lot of cryptozoologists don't have the background knowledge, are more willing to accept evidence that supports their worldview. Even if they take a more skeptical or scientific approach, there's still more of a confirmation bias there, more of a willingness to accept than, I guess, what you call mainstream scientists. I don't really like the term mainstream because there are a lot of mainstream scientists who do cryptozoology. Sometimes they say they do, sometimes they don't, but they still do it anyway. Scientists who have more of a critical or skeptical background are generally better equipped to handle it than most cryptozoologists.
I mean, beyond the AI content, is anyone doing it old school? Is anyone making a good fake model? The Nazca mummies spring to mind.
So that's a big topic.
Yeah, we need to have a sit down for that.
A lot of baggage, that whole thing. I have some knowledge about it, but some paleontologists have gotten involved with the three-fingered mummies at Nazca. And this would have been, I think they first hit the news back in like 2017. That's when like the whole thing about the US government and the UFOs was coming out. So they took the opportunity and really promoted those mummies first at that time, but they've periodically resurfaced. Were they shown at like Mexican Congress?
Yep. Some
governments just a year or two ago. So they're still in the news.
And then it was spun as it was discussed in Congress, but in fact, that was a member of the public just presenting it or something like that. It was like an open house thing. It was spun to give it credibility as if the government had a hearing, but I think it was just an open floor.
On one hand, the government is this huge nefarious entity that is your greatest enemy. But at the same time, anytime they support your belief in UFOs, then it's got to be true, right? And not something that's misleading or fake. But I mean, to get it out of the way, these mummies are fake. They're hoaxes.
Oh, there we go. The conclusion.
We haven't said that yet, that they are not real alien mummies from outer space. They have three fingers because they've been manipulated to have three fingers. They're made from human remains and probably plaster. That's why they have that sort of like white, dusty appearance.
Yeah. That was my immediate take. And again, it comes down to anatomy that, oh, these have been tested and they're biological, they're real bones. It's like, yeah, but bones don't connect like that. I was looking at some of the x-rays and was like, this thing couldn't move. That's not how bones join up.
Exactly. Like the three-fingered hands, and they also have three-fingered feet, I guess. So they're three-digited. X-rays were taken back in 2017. And right away, people notice that the anatomy is human and also doesn't make any sense. What has happened is that they've taken bones from the hand and feet and have mixed them together on both the hands and feet to make these long three-digited hands and feet. So the hands contain bones that are not only finger bones, but also contain like wrist bones and some of the toe bones. They're all mixed up together. One of the first guys to actually do an analysis, like a serious analysis of the X-ray, was a paleontologist. I think his name was Rudolfo Salas Gismondi. He was at the American Museum of Natural History, but I think he is from Peru, where these mummies are supposedly been found. So paleontologists were actually involved in this from the very beginning. They were some of the first to say, hey, this anatomy doesn't make any sense. But there are paleontologists who have gone the other way. So about a year or two ago, I think, there was a paleontologist named Clifford Miles who releases this huge, like 100, 200-page document on why the Nazca mummies are real. You know, it's got to break down to the x-rays, and there's all sorts of hand-wavy explanations on why actually the anatomy is clearly from an extraterrestrial and not just a human that has been rearranged.
Lean into the fact it's impossible and use that as evidence that it's alien.
It's got human-like features, but it's too weird to be human, even though, of course, it's because they've been rearranged. But the weird thing is that that's only about like the first half of the document. The rest of the document is a bunch of conspiracy theories. It's old footage and videos, like long known hoaxes. There are screenshots like from the X-Files in there that are presented like real alien bodies. That's not a joke.
Oh no.
There's all sorts of these well-known fakes that were exposed long ago. And it's just, I mean, this long rambling essay about how aliens are real, the government's hiding their existence, but at the same time, the government also supports their existence and backs up my claims, because that's the inherent contradiction in UFO studies nowadays. Government is the enemy and also our greatest friend. So even though I'm not really like a UFO guy, I have some knowledge of these mummies because paleontologists have actually gotten involved in them.
And I think we can still use these as parallels in helping us to sort of spot things. So I think this is a really interesting one because there's a little bit of sleight of hand, there's a little bit of magic going on here, and you'll be misdirected and really sort of driven on one of the more supportive facts. So every time these come up, it's like, oh, but we did analysis, these are real bones, this was a biological thing, and really drilling in on that. And every time you're like, yeah, but that's not how a shoulder joint works. That couldn't move. Yeah, but look, they're real bones, so they must be real.
Yeah, they move the goalposts every time. Some of the initial mummies were pretty bad fakes, like even worse than probably the ones you've seen. They're like, oh, those actually weren't real, right?
But these ones are.
But these ones are. The ones that look a little more convincing, these are actually real. They're always talking big about analyses. We've done x-rays, we've done DNA tests. They don't match humans. Okay, who's doing these tests? Oh, well, it's Dr. So-and-so, some scientist nobody's ever heard of who's never published anything. Or it's some well-known crank. Like they got some guy from Russia involved who claims he can read people's auras and like take photographs of their energies. And he was one of their big scientific consultants early on, and they were puffing him up. And yeah, they change their story every time. There's a new character getting his fingers in the pie every time it hits the news cycle. Then it's in the government, and yeah, it's never ending. We'll be hearing about these three-fingered mummies when we're 70 or 80 years old. There'll still be people defending them, claiming they're the most convincing evidence of extraterrestrials ever, and everybody is unfair for ignoring them.
A new version will drop. We'll be onto like version 5 by then, and they'll be really quite believable. Whoever's making them in the garage is going to be...
There'll be 200 mummies.
But you can see how they evolved.
They'll have found the spaceships by then, and their pyramids, and who knows what else. Their ray guns.
It's fascinating to sort of unpack the psychology of it. You saying sort of about bringing experts in. I saw a YouTube ad the other day. I'm going into some crunchier areas for some research I'm doing right now, and I actually like the basis of the stuff I'm looking at, but it's interesting the adverts that come along with it. And I got forced an ad talking about how I could cure tinnitus with baking soda, basically.
Yeah, there's all sorts of these fake, like, cure-all type ads, and they're usually AI generated. They're usually like videos of real people talking about something else, and then they've AI'd over their mouths so that to match the words.
Oh, that was because it had an uncanny valley thing.
They're even like a still image that they've moved with AI. There's a lot of really tricky, nasty deceptions that these fake medical ads use.
This was really slick. It was a very believable AI avatar, and it was a very nice voice, very well spoken, and it did that. Obviously, to keep me on the ad, it did that real circular language thing where every time it went round, it felt like it was about to tell you the thing, and then it went round again, and it was about to tell you something important, and it went round again. And there's the sort of classic, like, a neurobiologist has published research that showed that, wait, no, you don't get to say that. Who? Where can I read it? You can't just say it. You have to back it up.
Stick around till the end of this hour or 2 hour long video to find out my real secret. But the rest of the time, I'm just going to talk at you about nonsense. And then at the end of the video, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
They never reveal what the secret is.
Yeah, I think it was entirely AI generated, both the language and the person and it was horrifying, if I'm honest. I was upset for the rest of the day.
And I guess we could talk about some of my recent research and my consultancy work if you want to. For my master's research that I'm finishing up, I've actually done it on Megalodon. Big surprise. So last time I was on, I talked a bit about how there is actually skeletal material known from Megalodon and its relatives. Well, there's this very exceptionally preserved specimen that came from Belgium. It's a vertebral column that has 141 vertebrae preserved. We think that most of it is part of the precaudal column, which means the part of the vertebral column before the tail fin. We think it's mostly complete. It's maybe missing a few, and it may include a few of the caudal vertebrae, but it is a very fantastic specimen, the most complete that we know of Megalodon. But of course, it's still missing the tail, right? We don't know the exact count for the number of its caudal vertebrae. That's what my research is focused on for my master's thesis. It's actually estimating the total count, the precaudal plus the caudal vertebrae. So I've done this by taking data from modern lamniforms, and it's an order of sharks that are commonly known as the mackerel sharks. They're Megalodon's closest relatives. Megalodon itself is a lamniform, so it's part of that group. So I've gathered all this data from the literature on living lamniforms. It's been a lot of work. I spent over 2 years just gathering references, really searching through the literature. I've gotten a lot of stuff online, but I've also had to get physical copies of old books and papers. So I've managed to get together about 70 specimens from Megalodon's living relatives, looking at their precaudal counts, and then the relationship between the precaudal counts and the number of total counts. And it turns out the relationship between those two things is actually consistent. So I've come up with this mathematical equation. You can actually predict the number of total vertebrae from the precaudal vertebrae. So if we use the number of 141 precaudal vertebrae for Megalodon, I have now been able to estimate that Megalodon would have approximately 230 vertebrae. And this tells us quite a bit about it. This count is higher than most other lamniforms. So then I have to come up with ideas on how to explain why does it really have such a high count. Unfortunately, I've hit dead ends in answering that question. So I looked at two main hypotheses. One is that it had a high vertebral count because it had a more slender body form. This has been suggested in some recent papers that Megalodon may have been skinnier than previously thought, had more of an elongate body form because of how big it was. But I found that there was not any relationship between body slenderness and the vertebral count in the modern lamniforms. So that can't really be used as an explanation. Then I also tested if just overall body size, the large length of Megalodon being the largest lamniform, if that could possibly explain the high vertebral count. I could not find a relationship between the maximum length and the total vertebral count in modern lamniforms either. So we know that Megalodon now had this high vertebral count. I don't know how to explain it yet. I've been able to rule out two of the pre-existing hypotheses, but I still need to be doing some more work. And that'll probably be my doctoral, and later beyond that, I'll probably spend my whole career trying to figure that out. That's what I've mainly done for my master's. Then I also have started working a bit on my doctorals already. I guess I haven't said yet, I'm at the University of Wyoming in Laramie, Wyoming, United States. So I'm staying here for my doctorates. I'm actually looking at a new site that was discovered only about 5 or 6 miles away from the college, from town. So it's really close.
Oh, nice.
Really fortunate that it was just found like within the past few years while I've been doing my master's. And it is actually an ocean. It's the bottom of a seaway from the late Cretaceous period, about like 84 or 85 million years ago. And it's got various fish fossils embedded in this really like thick but finely grained chalk. It's a geological formation called the Niobrara Formation, and it would have been part of the Western Interior Seaway, an epicontinental seaway that existed over North America at this time. So I've been looking at the various parts we found there so far. We've already found at least 4 different genera and species just from collecting loosely excavated material. We haven't even done any like in situ excavations yet, which we're going to be doing. And we've already found 4 different taxa. So I've been looking at isolated scales. We've got a jawbone with teeth from one. We've also got a good part of a skeleton from another, including the vertebrae. So I've been reading through the literature, comparing with all sorts of other species known from the Western Interior Seaway and the Niobrara Formation to be able to identify them. This is actually the first site that we have been describing fish fossils from the Niobrara Formation in Wyoming. So I'll get to be the first to do that. I can talk a little bit about my time walking with dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah, please, because that was really
Before
cool.
we go. So back in, I think it was spring or early summer of 2023, I got an email out of nowhere from the BBC Science Unit. So they asked me to consult on episode 2. So episode 2 is mainly focused on the Spinosaurus, a big famous dinosaur. It was recently in the latest Jurassic World film that came out this summer, known from North Africa, late Cretaceous period, between 95 and 100 million years ago. So this episode is specifically set in Morocco in that time frame, and it focuses around a father Spinosaurus taking care of his babies. But I didn't work on the Spinosaurus. What I worked on is an animal called Octopus. So it's a type of cartilaginous fish. It's a ray, relative of sharks. It's a group that we scientifically call the sclerorhynchoids, but that's too much of a mouthful for most people. So I've come up with a common name for them. I call them saw skates because they have a long rostrum with denticles, sharp spikes on the sides like a sawfish.
Yeah.
They're not sawfish. They're closely related to modern skates. Had actually been featured in a documentary in 2011 called Planet Dinosaur, also by the BBC. Octopus was in an episode that also had Spinosaurus in it in Planet Dinosaur back in 2011. But they depicted it totally incorrectly. They depicted it as a giant sawfish. Like I said, Octopus and other saw skates are not actually sawfish. You'll see them called that in older literature. They were originally thought to be closely related, but their elongated rostrum with the large denticles, the spikes on the side, is totally convergently evolved. They're also not saw sharks. Saw sharks are another group that has convergently evolved a rostrum like
That
this.
is always really confusing. Yeah, and people sort of conflate the two. So the saw sharks, gills on side. Sawfish, gills underneath.
Sawfish, gills underneath. Saw skates, also gills underneath. Saw skates and sawfishes are both rays, but they're not close relatives. Sawfishes are more closely related to like guitarfishes, bowmouth guitarfishes, sometimes called the shark rays. Whereas, like I said, saw skates are more closely related to skates. It's more of that typical ray body form with the really large pectoral fins, but the reduced pelvic fins, reduced dorsal fins that are behind the pelvic fins and small. They have a reduced or possibly even absent caudal fin. So they were not tail propelled like sawfishes. Sawfishes have more of a shark-like body plan with a big caudal fin that they use to propel themselves. Whereas Octopus was more of a pectoral, like a flapper, right? But it also has a ton of other weird features. It's got these huge spiky denticles along its back that almost look like thorns. Similar again to some modern skates, but unlike sawfishes. Sawfishes don't have any of these enlarged denticles on their backs. But then on the rostrum, the actual arrangement of the rostral denticles is not the same as in sawfishes. Sawfishes have a mostly symmetrical arrangement. You know, a denticle on one side and then there's a matching denticle on the other side. They do get some asymmetry, but not nearly to the degree that Octopus does. And this is because the mode of replacement of their denticles. So sawfishes don't replace their denticles at all. If they lose one, like it falls out or gets pulled out, it's gone forever. They don't ever grow it back. They can heal ones that are partially lost. Like if they'll chip a tip, it will grow back. But once it's totally lost, they never replace them. Octopus is different though, in that it actually replaced them at regular intervals and in 3 different size series. And it also replaced them whenever one would be lost through trauma. Because we think they probably use their roster like modern sawfish. They would swing them through, a group of fish to cut the fish into pieces or at least stun them. And then it would eat them. It'd pin them to the ground, to the substrate, and then manipulate them into the mouth. Because that's what modern sawfishes do. It seems that saw sharks do the same thing. So it's probable that saw skates also use their rostrum in the same manner. They're not teeth from the mouth. They evolved directly from the dermal denticles, like on the rest of the body. But the thing is that the teeth in the mouth also probably evolved from the dermal denticles.
Depends how far back you go.
Just separately. So if you can imagine like the ancestral cartilaginous fish, it would have denticles on its body, but not in its mouth and not on its rostrum. But then eventually over time, they would evolve separately where you'd start getting denticles coming into the mouth, and those would form what we would call the oral teeth. Then there would have been a separate set of denticles that would have evolved on the rostrum, and those are the rostral denticles that convergently evolved to these 3 different groups. So they're not teeth from the mouth. So in Octopus, it would have replaced them throughout its life. We know it had at least 3 different size classes. So the Octopus would have begun its life with one set, and these would have been relatively small in size. But then it would have started to replace them with denticles that were larger in size. Then there was another series even after that, towards the end of its life, that was even larger than that. And then not only would it replace them on a regular basis, but if it lost one on one side, then it would be replaced by the latest growth series. So you get this really gnarly asymmetry where none of the denticles on either side line up. But coming back to Planet Dinosaur, they depicted it totally incorrectly. They showed it as this giant sawfish. And we're talking giant, like 8 to 10 meters long, like 26 to 33 feet. This is totally ridiculous for a freshwater animal. Not feasible at all. They make the claim that it had a rostrum 2 to 3 meters long. That's not true at all. The longest rostrum of an Octopus is only about 1 meter long. It's still huge, right?
Yeah,
this animal
it was enough.
And they didn't really have a specialist on hand at that time. Yeah, so they make that claim. They totally oversize it. They base its body plan. It's basically just a copy of a modern sawfish. So they get it totally wrong. And we know it's wrong at the time it comes out, right? And so when the BBC reached out to me, they had read my blogs because I had done a whole fact by fact analysis of what was presented in Planet Dinosaur, not just on how the model was wrong, but also the various facts that they get wrong about its size, but also its habits. They bizarrely claim that it swims up rivers to spawn like salmon. So they get stuff like that wrong. And I just did this whole fact by fact with all sorts of citations. So the BBC reached out to me. We did it pretty much all by email. Initially, they asked for like sort of a reference portfolio, all the information I could possibly gather just to give their modelers and the script writers as well, because the script writers have to take the animals into account, just to give them an idea of what they needed to be doing. So I gave them that. I gave them my blog posts. I gave them all the references I cited. I even gave them some unpublished material, like preliminary versions of reconstructions that I've been working on. And then about a year later, they came back to me with the first iteration of the model. It was already really close. They paid attention to my materials very closely. All we had to do was just some basic like proportional changes and minor like nitpicks and details and things. And that led into like the second version of the model. And then I proved it. It was all good. It was fantastic. So I gave them videos to reference of deep sea skates like that have been filmed by ROVs, where they're sitting on the bottom and then they'll be disturbed by the light or the movement of their ROV and they'll rapidly, flap away really quickly, but only for a short distance because they're not good swimmers. They're pectoral propelled. And that's exactly what the Onchopristis do in the show. So in the show, the Spinosaurus is shown as hunting the Onchopristis. We actually know that would have happened. We found a Spinosaurus jaw with what we think is maybe an Onchopristis or another suskate vertebrae actually wedged in between one of the teeth. We also have a Spinosaurus jawbone with a rostral denticle stabbed into the jawbone. It would have been a defensive weapon as well against these big predatory fish-eating dinosaurs. So we have direct evidence even for that ecological interaction. Even that detail is based on some kind of fossil evidence. So the Spinosaurus is shown hunting the sauskates. So I put all this work into it, and then I get criticisms about it on Facebook from other paleontologists. Why is the Onchopristis swimming like that? Why isn't it swimming like a sawfish? It's a big sawfish, right? It should be tail propelled. And that plays into a whole other thing that I want to be writing about how language influences, even reconstructions of Onchopristis fossils. You see them in fossil shops all the time, where they'll have rostra that have been cobbled together from multiple specimens. And instead of having a realistic arrangement where you've got small denticles and then a large denticle and then a large denticle and then another small one, if it's totally asymmetrical and messed up, but then some of the denticles are broken because it's a fossil and it's not perfect and it's missing parts. They never look like that in fossil shops. They're always perfect reconstructions and all the denticles are arranged in an even perfect row like a sawfish. So even just calling them sawfish influences how people reconstruct them to sell as fossils. They're composites. You could even call them forgeries because they're made from multiple individuals. They're not a realistic portrayal of the real animal, but they're being presented as if they are. So they are kind of a forgery. I wouldn't say a fake because they include mostly real material, but they're misleading. But I've seen them end up in traveling exhibits made by scientists. I've seen them end up in even actual museums being presented as like real specimens. This is how Onchopristis would have looked like. I've seen one in a museum and it's totally ridiculous. It's way too long. It's got like 40 denticles on each side. It should only have like 20 to 25. It's clearly not real. It's a composite specimen. They've got it in their museum in this big display. I've been meaning to write about these kind of forgeries. I've got tons of pictures. Some I've seen myself, some that other people have been kind enough to send me from museums and traveling exhibitions. So I'm building like a photographic reference base, and they're way too common for being forgeries and way too commonly shown even by people who should know better as being real specimens when they're just not. And even having life reconstructions based on them. So the language scientists use, just calling it a sawfish because it's good enough, right? They're not actual sawfishes, but they're similar enough, right? Well, no, actually, they're not. Amateurs or fossil dealers who don't know any better will reconstruct them like a sawfish. And then those reconstructions end up in museums, influencing back paleontologists into thinking that they're sawfishes. And then it influences the documentaries. It influences the popular books about them.
And then when you try and be accurate, somebody says that you're not because this is so embedded in the culture.
Yeah, and then when I initially came up with the common name in 2021, I did a conference abstract about it and a short presentation. And one of the reviewers said, is this really necessary? Isn't it just good enough that we call them sawfishes? We as specialists know they're not actually sawfishes, right? Well, not all specialists actually do. And most people who are not specialists certainly don't. And it has had this whole cascading negative effect on them being perceived totally incorrectly.
I really like that the truth looks like a bad forgery because, as you say, it's asymmetrical. It's all a bit.
They're ugly, and I mean that as a term of endearment.
Yeah.
They're hideous. They're gnarly. They're the most freakish thing ever, and I think that's awesome. That's what I really wanted to do with this documentary, and I hope we've succeeded, is really show people finally like how bizarre these animals would be. Not just Onchopristis, but other saucegates. They show an immense diversity in their rostral denticles, far more than saw sharks or sawfishes. Saw sharks and sawfishes are almost comically undiverse compared to the saucegates. We have saucegates that have these elongated rostral denticles that almost form like an interlocking comb. A genus called Tenopristis, literally meaning comb saw. It may have been a sediment sifter, but we've only ever found these isolated denticles. We've never found any rostral. We've never found any skull or body material. So the exact function are still unknown, but we think it might have been using its rostrum and its long, thin tentacles like a comb, sifting through the sediment. I mean, there's all sorts of like bizarre spikes that have barbs and have barbs on two sides. Like Onchopristis only has barbs on one side. There's some that have them on two sides. They get all sorts of weird ornamentation. That's my long rambles about Onchopristis in the documentary. I'm very happy with being featured in Walking with Dinosaurs. You know, you just never know when you get these emails and you do this work if you're ever actually going to get credit in the end. So I had to hide it for a long time, and I also signed an NDA. But finally, watch it, and I'm thrilled because I am in the credits. So yeah, so that's what I've been up to for the past 4 years.
I mean, that looks busy.
This podcast is probably going to be way too long.
I'll let it run a little longer.
One thing before we go, I should give you a bit of an update on some of the stuff I talked about last time. You know, we talked about the megalodon and cryptozoology.
Oh, yes, please.
I have actually published some of my research on that. So in 2023, I finally got my budding year and finished it. I've been working on it since 2019, and I published this big, long paper. It's like 20 pages long. Half of that is references. There are like 150, 160 references and then like 8,000 words of text or something. It's the longest thing I've ever written by far. It's basically a monograph on the history of megalodon and cryptozoology. Still pretty proud of it. It's my magnum opus so far. So if you're interested in a more in-depth exploration, megalodon and cryptozoology, the major sightings that are promoted by people, the history of those, an attempt at a reasonable explanation for all of them, tons of references to the primary cryptozoological literature, but also the modern zoological and paleontological literature. I have published that. I can send you the link to that. I published that in 2023. I am already working on an addendum to that, though. I have already collected enough material to publish like a proper update on that. Got more sightings to talk about, more details that I didn't have last time that I need to update. I've discovered like some things in the original that I talked about are actually like hoaxes. They're plagiarized from earlier sources. I found more primary accounts to add details to the originals. I've got a lot of material that I need to get working on to get that addendum up. So hopefully I will also have that soon. I've also published some other research about megalodon and the history of paleontology in general. I've talked about this specimen that I've nicknamed Mitchell's Monster. It was first published by a naturalist named Samuel Latham Mitchell in the early 1800s. It doesn't have a specimen number. The museum it was at was destroyed in a fire, unfortunately. So we only have the historical literature to go off of. And from these accounts, I've worked together that it was probably megalodon teeth associated with the whale skeleton. The first ever discovery of that kind of thing. So it is an important historical thing. But I've done all sorts of research on that, reconstructing the story on that, and it does intersect with cryptozoology. It's really interesting because it plays into the megalodon stuff, even though it was not initially identified as a megalodon. This skeleton was discovered in North Carolina, I think. It's one of the Carolinas in around 1816. On a plantation, they're digging for some kind of purpose. They unearth this skeleton. It's a vertebral column, and then it's got teeth with it. They don't know what it is. There's speculation that it's a giant shark, which is fairly correct. But there's also this idea that it could be a sea serpent, because that's a hot topic in the 1810s. In America, there's sightings of like the Gloucester sea serpent in Massachusetts, which are nationwide news. It's a huge, huge topic at the time. There are a lot of major people taking this very, very seriously. So maybe it's a sea serpent. So they send it from the Carolinas up to New York to a guy named Samuel Latham Mitchell. He's an early naturalist. He's a Renaissance man, right? He does a ton of different things like most wealthy people at that time. He's like a senator, congressman of some sort, but he's also involved in all sorts of like natural history studies. He's one of America's first serious paleontologists. He builds up his huge personal collection, one of the first like large scale collections of fossils in the United States. So the specimen is sent to him because he's the guy to send it to, right? He writes up a short description of it in 1818. He keeps the original identifications. Maybe it's a giant shark, maybe it's a sea serpent, but it's this huge vertebral column, like 34 to 36 feet long, with these big, heavy like backbones. Like maybe like 12 pounds or more per backbones. They're dense, big bones. And it's got these triangular shaped teeth that are like 6 inches long. Well, what has teeth that are triangular and 6 inches long? Nothing but the megalodon. But the vertebrae are too heavy, right? They're not a megalodon. The vertebral column is probably from a whale, right? So they found this association of megalodon teeth and vertebrae from a whale, which is in itself very significant. That's the first time that ever would have been found. That's still very rare to find that today. Unfortunately, the specimen is donated in 1826 to a museum called the Lyceum of Natural History in New York City. This is one of the first natural history museums in the United States. Latham is one of its first presidents. He's like a founding member. So he donates his fossil and like rock collection to them. So they store it over a period of many years, but they run into all sorts of financial troubles. They move buildings like once every 5 to 10 years. Everything is left in storage. Then in 1866, their latest building burns down. Their entire collection that they've been gathering for the past 50 or 60 years, the largest natural history collection in the United States and in North America at that time, gone in a single night in a fire. And that includes Mitchell's monster, this amazing megalodon and whale specimen. So we only have the historical accounts to base it off of. So that was my job, reconstructing that story, because it had never been put together before. Mitchell's original description had been mentioned once or twice in the literature, and even like in a recent blog post by a paleontologist. But nobody had ever put together all the historical material. Oh, I should specify, he only had a single vertebrae and 2 of the teeth. The whole thing wasn't sent, just part, but he still described it based on like the oral accounts he received. So all people knew was that it was sent to him, and then there was nothing from there. Well, I found the donation catalog to the Lyceum that he wrote because it was his collection. But then I also had to figure out when and where it was exactly collected. Mitchell did not give like a precise date or time frame, and he gives inconsistent details on who even found it. So I actually had to look through old newspaper accounts, and these are some of the oldest possible ones that are currently digitized, right? These are newspaper accounts from like 1818, 1817, 1816. And I did find a newspaper notice from 1816 of him receiving the specimen and actually teaching with it. Because he did teach a class, like a natural history anatomy class at a local college. And there was a notice in a local New York newspaper about it in 1816 that he had had that specimen by that time and had been teaching with it. So that's how I was able to put more of a date on what it would have been found, 1816 or maybe like a year or two earlier. But then, even though it had not been initially identified as a megalodon, it had been identified as a giant shark or a sea serpent, it had actually been connected with sightings of giant sharks in the 1830s. And there's 2 different sightings, but they're both in Southeast Asia, and they both probably represent whale sharks, described as being this large, like square-headed shark with sort of that like spotted pattern. Probably a whale shark. That's what has been accepted as the explanation. But there are speculations that it's some sort of prehistoric monster. There's one sighting in, I think, like 1834 and another in 1835. The guy in the 1834 sighting says maybe it's a plesiosaurus. Okay, probably not. That's way off. But the second guy says, what if it's a giant shark? So he had actually heard about Mitchell's monster. He had gotten another, like a secondhand account about it. And he said, what if this sighting that I had of this big shark is the same animal that Mitchell described? What if it's this big prehistoric shark? That's crazy, right? It's the 1830s, and people are already starting to speculate about giant prehistoric sharks only known from fossils as being still alive and being sighted by people. But this is like the origin point for the whole megalodon thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was astounded when I discovered this. Like, that's crazy. People have been talking about this idea since the 1830s. You know, and unfortunately, I run into it a lot of times where people are too dismissive of the megalodon stuff. Skeptical scientists who maybe know a lot about sharks but don't know a lot about the history of the whole megalodon thing are too quick to dismiss it. They say, well, it's just a recent phenomenon, right? There's not really anything to it. There's not really any sightings. There's not really any literature. Well, no, there's actually a whole ton of literature. It's an old, very complicated idea. It didn't start off really as anything big. It snowballed over time, but there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of branches on the tree that some go places, some don't. It's a really complex, really old idea that has a lot of cultural sticking power. It's not sufficient to debunk it by just saying, well, it's a recent thing. You know, the Meg movies made it up or the documentary made it up. It's not like important. We shouldn't spend time on it. You got to understand the whole history behind it. And that's why I've been working on publishing these papers and doing all this research. I've still got so much more work to do on it.
That's what I've always loved about your research and why I find it fascinating is even though you are saying that this is something untrue, you are researching and uncovering that untruth and its origins, which is far more informative than, oh, this is just a recent phenomenon.
If you want to be a good skeptical cryptozoologist, you have to be a historian. And that's, I mean, the same goes for any field. You should be at least a confident historian of your field. It helps a lot, even in doing your modern studies. But in cryptozoology, it's an absolute necessity to do good scholarship. Because these ideas, I mean, and megalodon is like this tiny, tiny part of cryptozoology. And cryptozoology itself is sometimes considered like a subculture, considered a fringe thing. So it's a small part of a small thing, but but it's actually way more complex than you think. And it's like being a deep sea fisherman. To bring it back around to the deep sea,
There we
it's
go.
like trawling the ocean bottom, the depths of obscurity, and bringing up some new, weird, totally unheard of fish. Every time you do research, it's something new. I think I've covered everything I wanted to catch people up on.
We will include in the show notes, hopefully, almost everything you've spoken about. Thanks so much, Tyler. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I had fun. If you ever want me to come back, I'll come back anytime.
Gladly. And feel free to like get in touch with us as well. Like if something cool is happening, I like checking in with you. I liked covering the frog as well and how ridiculous that was.
Yeah, that was quite the thing. It'll probably happen again.
Yeah, it will. I'll catch you next time.
Yeah, see you later.
I don't know if you've come across any particularly egregious AI stuff.
It's not necessarily AI stuff, but there was AI's a big part of it. But last year I think we've talked about this before, but the goblin shark, right? It's only ever been filmed twice. The first time I think the Japanese trolled a couple and they managed to get them into a harbour. So they had put a diver in, right? And that's where those images of using the snout jaw thing came from. And so, yes, they were filmed alive, but not necessarily in a natural setting.
And that red fish it's eating is clearly dead. It's clearly been given that.
Yes. And so actually just encountering one in the wild was actually us this time last year. And there's a piece of footage, it's about, I don't know, 10 seconds long. It's not great, but it's certainly a goblin shark. And so you know how when goblin sharks die, their jaw comes out and look, everyone knows what they look like when they're relaxed, but in real life, they're just big, sharks. But
it's like the
if you go
blobfish.
online and say, give me a picture of a goblin shark, half of them are obviously just dead samples, which makes sense because most of the specimens, most of the records of this thing have come from washing up on a beach or bycatch or whatever it may be. But it's just completely flooded with AI generated or just art or interpretations of these things. And so that makes it really difficult when you're trying to get a proper idea on this. It's like, you're trying to find a legitimately good, scientifically accurate picture or drawing or schematic of this animal was really hard because of the volume of rubbish you have to punch through to get to it. And that's the only time I've ever been sort of genuinely frustrated by the fluff on the internet.
Some people were trying to sort of quantify that because Google image searches, like somebody was actually going through and then highlighting the images that were real. And as more and more of this content is getting generated, it becomes this feedback loop. So actually your Google image results are getting less and less accurate because the proportions are changing. I think there's a little bit of something in Google image searches where it sort of evaluates the quality of the image. And because AI generated images are beautifully lit and really high resolution and really in focus because they're not real, they get sort of bumped to the top. Example I saw was for baby peacock, and there's loads of AI generated images of what we would assume a baby peacock looks like. But of course, that whole plumage thing is a sexual advertisement, and they don't have any of that when they're juveniles. They're just little brown birds. So the amount of images of baby peacock, which looks like a peacock with the big fan tail and the beautiful blue, we know those aren't real, but it's the majority of hits on Google Images.
It's a tough world we live in, Tom.
Tyler was a bit more optimistic. We've kind of been through this before. And when the new tech comes out, we fall for it for a little while, but then we sort of learn to see through it. I'm hoping it'll self-right again and we haven't finally invented something so convincing that we can't adapt to it. But I feel like that's already happening as well. They're like, I can recognize the style of language when one of these tools has been used and that sort of cartoony style they do. Because I enjoyed making some images when it first came out, but now they all start to feel the same. There's something about it, there's some uncanny valley thing where they still look like really good images, but they all feel the same. That makes sense. And I feel like I'm starting to see through
what it is you lack all the subtle, or the almost subconscious imperfections.
Yeah.
Of a real photograph, right? Real photographs are never really perfect. It's that, the uncanny valley thing. It's like it's almost too real. It's too perfect.
Yeah.
People don't look like that.
It would have a bit of mud on it. It would have a scar. It would have a torn feather. But these like weird, dreamlike, perfect images, doesn't feel right.
Is it time we just did a Control-Delete on the entire internet? Start again?
Might be time for a do-over. We've learned our lessons. We'll get it right next time.
Yeah, definitely.
We always learn from our mistakes, humanity. And that concludes this episode of the Deep Sea Podcast. We'll deep sea you next time, and we abyss you already.
You know, all the other sharks all line up in awe of the golden shark as he comes down.
Oh, it's
like
lovely.
C-3PO on the forest moon of Endor.
That is true. That is true. That's a good reference. That's it. Will it be worshipped as a god?
Yeah, it should be.
It should be. It's a
I've
lovely
also got
shark.
issues with that. I don't know if I texted you this, Tom, but I was watching Return of the Jedi recently while I was
All right,
while I was
sidebar.
pretending
Okay.
to be. Total sidebar, but it's to do with gold, right? The second half of Return of the Jedi, they all go to a forest and they all wear camouflage, except C-3PO, who's shiny, shiny gold. Like, if you're an enemy Imperial sniper, is it because they were baiting him? It's like, we'll go in camouflage, no one will see us. And then it's like, but what about the gold guy? Like, he's going to stand out a little bit in the forest. And it was just like, don't worry about him.
Has he been bait the whole time? Like, can you rewatch the trilogy and just assume that, because
he's just there to take that shot that comes in from where you didn't see coming, right? Because if anyone's going to take a shot, they're going to go for a big shiny chrome dome, right? They're not going to go for the guy hiding in a tree wearing green.
I mean,
and it's just like, do you want this guy to die? Maybe the answer was yes.
If his purpose is as a translator, surely with all their technology, like, he could be replaced by a headset.
It could be replaced by a headset, or they could at least give him a coat. Give him a green coat. Give
Don't
him
even have
some
to paint
camouflage.
him.
Just
Put a jacket on the fella.
Just put a jacket on this guy because he sticks out like a massive lump of gold in a forest. It's like he's asking for it. The fact he survived is incredible.
And I'm guessing they have
Anyway.
better than just optics. They have some sort of sensors. He's not very stealth. Like, I'm guessing, he's got a great radar return and is magnetic.
Yeah, it's big chunk of shiny metal in the trees. It's just like, what the hell? They obviously don't have his back, do they?
Oh, I've got to lock him in. Who? The guy that looks like an Oscar.
They could afford massive spaceships that can travel at hyperspace and whatever, and they can't afford a coat. Just give this guy like a $20 green coat and say, you want to also lie low.
Yeah.
Right? You want to keep quite low down because if you don't, someone will shoot you in the face.
Can someone
Being
put a
shot in the
jacket on
face,
that idiot?
droid or otherwise, is not good. And so you want to keep down low, keep stealthy. This is how it works. No, I'm just going to stand up and reflect the sunlight from my gold exoskeleton.
Pretty much
Nothing
what they
will
tell you to
harm
do
me.
if you're lost at sea, like using a CD to signal for help.
Yes. Anyway, so I was thinking of that when I saw this golden shark. I'm wondering what adventures that shark has had to live as a result
To get
of
to adulthood when you're bright gold.
yeah. But Dave, do you know that you're a different colour from everybody else? Or maybe he goes into a reef they hadn't been to before, and as it turns up, all the other sharks are like, it's
The chosen one.
This the golden shark, the chosen one has arrived, and then he just mullers all of them whilst they're distracted by his beautiful golden fleece. He just destroys every
It's
other
the golden
shark.
fleece now it's biblical.
I mean, to be fair, they could have given C-3PO a fleece. Didn't have to be gold, just green or even black. Black would have worked.
Just lie down. Just stay in the cave. Don't come outside because you're no good in combat. You can't move. So just stay inside.
Well, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but why did he take a protocol droid? Why was he even there? I mean, he's useless. He doesn't even have a gun. He's absolutely hopeless. Absolutely, totally, utterly hopeless in a conflict combat scenario. If anything, he's going to absolutely 100% give away their position. Even the worst stormtrooper in the world is going to be like, I think I know where they are.
But is it all just sort of foreshadowing to the prequels? Are they like, oh, I've got a lock, and then Vader himself comes over the radio and is just like, no, not that one. So why? I built it when I was a kid. What the? You telling me that in a whole universe that thing you built as a child is in front of me right now with the rebels?
Yeah. And what's he doing? Just translating Imperial English into rebel English. It's like, why did he do that? Yeah.
Can he talk to the little bears? No. Oh, that would have been useful.
Actually, he does. He
Does
does
he?
talk to the little bears.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does some little thing. So yeah, actually, when I think about it, he does do a bit of protocoling. But either way, they wouldn't know that at the time. They're like, right, let's get the biggest badass, commandos we've got, and we'll blow up this massive thing. Are we going to bring this weird protocol thing with us, with this bright gold? Yes, we must. Why?
Merchandising.
Because he's going to take it for the team when the snipers arrive. That's why.
We get a one-shot warning if he comes with us.
Yes, he's a canary in the mine.
Look at his big shiny head.
Yeah. I'd love to take a shot at that guy.